Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live and playing around with our green screen for fun. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Jen Peeples is here with me today. How you doing?
Everybody? Good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. You should be like ecstatic.
How so?
I'll get to that in a minute.
All right.
This is the Atheist Experience. It's a live public access television program sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin. We are here every Sunday from 4:30 to 6 p.m. on Channel 16 on Time Warner and Grande Cable, assuming you live in the right place and it's not blocked by whatever facility you happen to use. Sponsored by the ACA, which is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. And the ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, beginning at 11:30. Except for the first Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Today was the first Sunday of the month, but we didn't have the lecture, and I'll explain why in a minute. Next month's lecture will actually be Chris Comer, who some of you may have heard of from the debacle of sending out an email to notify people about a lecture on evolution and creationism and getting fired, and so she'll be here to talk a little bit about that stuff as well. You can check the ACA website for more information about the lecture series and more information about the ACA in general. It's www.atheist-community.org. You can go there to find out not only about where and when we meet, like the Romeo's Sunday Brunch and the lecture series. After this program's over, we get together and go to Threadgill's, 301 West Riverside Drive. They'll have that address up. I'm changing the order just to mess with them because it's fun. We also do regular blood drives, food drives, street cleanups for Keep Austin Beautiful, things like that. In addition, the audio portion of this program is available for download and as a podcast. The video is normally available at Google Video. However, as of last week, we are no longer able to upload at Google Video. So Don is frantically working to finalize our new potential hosting solution. And there's a couple other options that we're investigating as well. We'll have more information about that. The good news is that the video stream is, as far as I can tell, actually working, which means you can log in and watch it live. You don't have to just rely on the audio. Every Sunday at 4:30 Central, you can go to the address that they're going to put up on the screen here in a second, at least for now, unless we change things. It's ustream.tv/channel/the-atheist-experience. Hey, I got it right. You can go there, you can watch the show live, you can also participate in a raucous chat room in conjunction with the show if you're a very daring individual. This is a live call-in show. We'll have the number up for you in a little while. Normally what we end up doing is talking for a while because we love to hear ourselves speak, and then we'll put the number up and you can call in and explain what you believe and why, ask questions, discuss various religious beliefs, philosophical issues, whatever the co-host has decided to discuss today, and I'll let Jen go over that with you as well. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Non-Prophets. That's PROPHETS. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com for more information about that program. We were live yesterday and the week before, we did 3 in a row to make up for it. So we won't be, make up for missing one. We won't be live this coming week, but we'll be live in 2 weeks, which I believe is the 14th.
2 weeks from yesterday?
2 weeks from yesterday, 14th, 15th.
16th.
14th, 15th, 16th. 16th. We'll go with 16.
Yeah.
Look it up. You've got a calendar. If you're watching on the computer, it's right down there in the lower right. Just click. You're good. It features Dennis Lee Bay, myself, Russell Glasser, Schilling, and Thad. Various people on various occasions talking about various topics. It's primarily geared more towards an atheist audience, whereas this program is geared towards anybody and everybody, which means that I have the opportunity to irritate some people and hopefully educate a few others and enlighten a few, who knows. But the big issue here is to try and alleviate some of the misconceptions that people have about who atheists are, what atheism is, what we believe, what we don't believe, why, and maybe address some of the disconnect that seems to occur between religious individuals and non-religious individuals. Specifically, and since we have to share space and get along, it'd be nice to find some kind of common ground and ways to deal with conflicts. But mostly, I'm also interested in what you believe and why. If you happen to disagree, if you think there's a God, if you have some kind of evidence for the existence of God, if you want to explain your particular beliefs because you think they're justified, great. You can call in. And if you don't get through on the phone today, or if you don't want to, you can email us at tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-host, some of the people behind the scenes. We cannot possibly answer all of them. I'm 50 or so behind at the moment, but we do read all of them, assuming you get through the spam filter, which you can avoid by putting AETV in the subject line, and that will make sure that your mail is most likely to get to us. We do answer a ton of them, though, between me, you, Tracy, Don, Russell, Jeff, everybody. Martin. Frank. Everybody is digging in and answering as many emails as we reasonably can. But thanks to the fact that we are now hosting it as a podcast, streaming the show live, and getting mail from all around the world. I mean, just this week in my email inbox, if I were to start putting pins on that big map in my room, I wouldn't have been able to answer emails. It would have just been, I'm going to pin, Denmark and Japan. And so we really appreciate what the internet has provided us with the opportunity to reach out to so many people, especially with the opportunity to let people know that you're not alone. And if you're the kind of person who has been sitting around thinking that, I'm weird, I'm the only atheist, or I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and stay below the radar for fear of rocking the boat around my religious family members, etc. You can know that you're not alone. Know that there's probably an atheist or free thought or secular or whatever organization in your area or close to it, and if there's not, you can actually start one. It's not really that difficult. Ours started with an ad in the newspaper. So welcome everybody. What have you got for us?
What have I got? I got some emails.
Email? It is. It's email.
Email.
We get this is going to be fun.
Yeah, we get some really good emails. So yeah, thought we'd share
I
with our
completely
viewers.
missed the big announcement.
The big announcement, yeah.
Today, instead of the lecture, the ACA held its annual elections for the board of directors. We vote for president, vice president, and then 7 additional directors. And for those of you who've been watching the show will know that I've been president for the last few years. I was surprisingly re-elected today as president of the ACA. And Jen is now vice president, or vice president-elect. You take over soon, so yay!
Thank you.
So for those of you who've been waiting to call in, you've been watching the show, you've been sitting around saying, well, I don't want to just talk to some yahoo. I want to get it straight from the horse's mouth. You now have the top 2 dogs here to talk to you, all in one show.
Yes,
this is too much awesome for anybody to handle. And a Doctor Who intro?
That's right. Well, not only that, but this is the 1-year anniversary of my first appearance on the Atheist Experience.
Coincidence? I think not.
Yeah, and in fact, that was the circumcision show that was lots of fun. Very
Yes.
controversial.
And painful to listen to.
Yeah.
It's all yours.
All right.
Take it away.
Well, we got an email, I think it was earlier this week, and it was someone talking about all those Christians that call you into your show, they're not representative of most Christians. They don't present good arguments. They're idiots. We get actually a fair number of emails like that. Yes, they actually are representative of what we see from most Christians around here. You said you went to a church service
last week.
And
a few other weeks. It's a good time to point out, actually, that we don't pick who calls into the show. The number's up if you're in the Austin area. You'll see it. If you're watching the stream, you'll see it, including the area code. And the people who call in. And the only thing that we screen for is to try and eliminate some prank calls and some people who are calling to, be abusive or whatever. If somebody calls in and says, and you can go back and listen, there's people who've said that they have proof that the spiritual world and ghosts exist by holding a mirror underwater. And then we've also had apologists call in to argue the transcendental argument for the existence of God. I don't discriminate. I'll talk to anybody.
Yeah.
People think I'm crazy for some of the emails that I answer, but.
Well, and just to let everyone know, it's not just Christians that we hear from. Earlier this week, we got an email. Actually, I think it was last week. We got our first email from a Muslim who is convinced that God is real. And he knows this because he read it in the Quran. And this is what he read in the Quran that convinced him, okay? It says, there's a couple of arguments which have convinced me, but I'm just going to mention one argument which convinced me that the existence of God in the Quran, it's kind of a little incoherent here. But basically it says that there's a lot of scientific discoveries in the Quran that people didn't actually understand, or they were foretold like 1,400 years ago, and now we know what they are. And then he comes up with a couple of verses here, and it says in the Quran it talks about dust being sprinkled as well in chapter 15 verse 23, and the verse is as follows: and we send impregnating winds, and then we send water down from the clouds, and we give it to you to drink, and you're not the ones to store it up. He says that this impregnating winds thing means that pollen floats around and fertilizes the flowers. Mm-hmm. That's what the impregnating winds thing means. And that it was actually Prospero Alpini who discovered that date palms require a male and a female plant. And this was some, let's see, I think it was something like 1580 or something like that when Alpini made his discovery. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so apparently he believes that the Quran foretold Alpini's discovery. And so I responded to him that there's early evidence that people were cultivating dates for food as early as about 6,000 BCE, and certainly they were in widespread cultivation even throughout the Middle East by around 4,000 BCE. So I think that by the time Muhammad got around to writing his stuff down in the Quran, some 5,000 years almost had passed. Humans had probably figured out that you didn't get dates unless you had a male and a female plant.
Even if they didn't completely grasp the idea that there was a
right.
male and female plant. And by the way, it's worth noting that even if this would have been something that wouldn't have been necessarily known or widely known, there's no link between a point like this, that impregnating winds, which is really not the winds that impregnate, but if you're going to speak kind of poetically, I'm fine with that. There's no link between a book says this to the reason the book says this is because God revealed it to somebody. It may have been the case that people simply began to learn and discover things, and some people discovered them at different dates than other people did, or had some basic understanding, like you're talking about cultivating dates and things, here's the thing, Arab culture was on the cutting edge until the Quran was written and took over in a theocracy, and since then it's been stagnating while everybody else catches up and passes them as far as technological breakthroughs and stuff. Now, if you're going to argue that the Quran is the divine word of Allah, you'd think that it would improve things, that it would further facilitate discovery and understanding instead of retarding progress. He also mentioned the male and female.
It gets even better. It gets even better because I responded to him about that humans knew a lot about date cultivation even before Muhammad wrote the Quran. And he comes back and he's like, oh, but there's something else that says, holy is he that has created everything in pairs, because dates have a male plant and a female plant. And so then he goes on to say that he's made two specific claims, and that first, that everything in this world has a male and a female, and the second is that impregnating winds foretold pollen, which no one before this verse was able to understand. Okay, and then he goes on to say, either you can show me something which has only a male type or only a female type, or you can show me through history books that somewhere in the world has made the discovery of pollen and what did it before this verse was revealed. Well, first of all, on point one, New Mexico whiptail lizard, female only. Okay, they reproduce by parthenogenesis, or actually it's a direct clone. So there you go. There's also a species of ants that was recently discovered that they're only females. So it does happen. Parthenogenesis is well known in reptiles and insects.
I think there's an account of shark parthenogenesis
Yes,
as
and
well.
sharks, yes.
That's different. It's more of a spontaneous parthenogenesis. It's not a species that typically produces asexually. And you don't even have to go with lizards and stuff. You can go with asexual living things as well. Things
Right.
that the Quran doesn't seem to tell us about, like
Right.
bacteria.
Yeah. What is not observed is parthenogenesis in mammals. That's never been observed. So all you Virgin Mary people, keep that in mind.
Plus, if you're going to claim parthenogenesis to explain Jesus' birth through a virgin,
Yeah.
Jesus was a girl.
Exactly.
Parthenogenesis necessarily is a direct clone of the female that it came from, which is why all those lizards are just females, because they don't have that
Right.
chromosome. Anyway,
And the second thing about that impregnating winds thing, it says that it foretold pollen. No, it didn't. That's a pretty vague statement, and it doesn't actually say anything about pollen. And if you were going to tell somebody something useful about how to pollinate flowers to get like a higher harvest or anything, you might want to tell them that it was the bees that are doing most of the work for you, because only about 10% of plants are pollinated through either not through animals or insects. And of those, about 80% of that's pollinated through wind, and the rest is pollinated with water. Okay, so it's mostly the insects. So of what use could that verse have been, even if you say that it's, the winds are doing it, because the winds are only responsible for about 8% of pollination.
it's similar in a
So
way
it's
to...
pretty useless.
There was a debate we went to last Tuesday, which we talked about on nonprofits yesterday, so I'm not going to go through it in detail. But a lot of what ended up happening was the creationist presenters would basically take some discovery, some understanding, something we've come to know through science, and then say, oh, there's a verse in the Bible that's kind of like that. Now, that's not prediction, as Michael Shermer pointed out, it's postdiction. And even if the original intent of this verse about impregnating winds was to inform people about pollen, it failed to do the job. Its only usefulness is once we've discovered pollination and a particular method for pollination, is to go back and say, oh yeah, there it is. Well, now you're in the position where you're constantly reading into what is written there. You can't really call that a revelation or any kind of guidance or anything else if it's all retrofitted, if it's all,
Right.
post-diction. Why, if there is this divine being, and I don't care whether you're relying on the Quran or the Bible or whatever holy book you want, who has information about reality to reveal to people. First of all, why would they ever bother doing it in the limited medium of text? And then why would they do it in poetic language instead of more directly? And why is it that we don't find these things until after we've found them by scientific, natural means?
Right, and that was, the other point I was trying to convey to this guy is that if you did call this some kind of prophecy or that it was foretold, it was absolutely useless if it took us, another millennium to figure it out what he was talking about. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong here, but as I understand it, Alpini's discovery wasn't that you needed pollen, because I think people maybe understood that before Alpini did his work on date palms.
I'm not sure.
I think his discovery was actually that you could do it artificially. So there's probably a botanist out there that can elaborate on that and send me an email about it, but I think that was Alpini's contribution. So he was factually incorrect about Alpini's discovery anyway. But so there you go. We've got.
It's just, I don't want to make the claim. We've talked about fractal wrongness before, but exactly what is going on here when you've got somebody who says, "I'm convinced there's a God because there's this passage in my holy book that agrees with something about nature that we've come to understand, and it seems to have said it before we could have understood it." So what? First of all, like I mentioned, people are maybe discovering things in different ways, but you're also doing post-diction. You're feeding it back into what you read. That passage didn't enlighten anybody or steer anybody towards a correct answer. It's all found out after the fact. And even if it had, like if you found this passage in the Bible and it seemed to contradict, or the Quran, it seemed to contradict something that we understand in science, and then you went and investigated and found out that it was actually accurate, if you had followed a predictive path that way, it doesn't tell you why it was accurate. It's not necessary to make the claim that it's accurate because there is an all-knowing being who relayed this information by some means to somebody else. That claim is completely unsupported anyway. I mean, you know, well, where's the prediction in the Bible that, you know, Miami would beat Atlanta by on this particular day? I mean, it doesn't matter that it wouldn't have made sense to people at the time. It would have, when it happened, and I'm not saying it would. I don't care about either team. If it did happen, then there would be a specific prediction that it would be absurd to think that anybody could have written about at the time that it was written, including in a poetic sense.
Yeah.
And Michael Shermer during Tuesday's air quotes debate pointed out a bit of poetry where a creative reading of what this poet said appears to be a predictor of the double helix of DNA.
Yeah.
Boy, you're treading on really dangerous ground when you can just read whatever you want into whatever you want.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, something clear and unambiguous. I mean, if there was some passage in the Bible, the Quran, that said F equals MA, don't worry about what it means right now. It'll make sense to you later. You know, that would have been useful.
There's a problem with that, though, too, in that somebody would have come up with a formula. It would still use those symbols, but it would mean something else.
Yeah.
If it was described a little bit differently rather than just a simple formula, that'd be pretty useful.
But even that, you know, would have been a lot better than what we get. Another one we get. The title of this email is "Christians may be stupid, but atheists are just mean SOBs."
Yeah.
And he lists 3 points. Okay.
3.
Yeah. Three.
He's going to give us the 3 explanations, his 3 reasons.
3
atheists are
justifications.
just mean SOBs. Number 1.
Ayn Rand. Okay.
That's all he wrote?
That's it. That's
Okay.
number 1.
Number 2.
Number 2, the most hated woman in America. So far he's got 2 dead people.
Ayn Rand and Madeline Merrill here.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Arguing about something that is clearly not worth the time.
That's number 3.
Yep.
So it's mean to argue about something that's clearly not worth the time.
And yet he took the time to email us. Of course, he didn't give us a legitimate email address.
Yeah.
So
Couldn't respond.
Yeah, so we can't respond.
That's all right.
But,
Saves me some time.
Yeah. All right. So, first of all, the first two, okay, whatever. The last one, if it's not worth the time, then why have we spent probably 20 years dealing with the aftermath of the moral majority and the Contract on America and lots of other stuff, people injecting theism into our secular government? And we're still cleaning up that mess.
Yeah, I mean, he's free to think that it's a waste of time.
Yeah, I think it's well worth the time.
Yeah, I don't see how
why I
a
did.
waste of time makes us mean SOBs. I fully admit, though, without reservation, I can on occasion be a mean SOB.
Yeah.
I can also be disrespectful and rude and condescending and arrogant. And I can also be patient and erudite and understanding. To sum anybody up with like, oh, atheists are just mean. I mean, and this is, granted, this email is not typical. Usually they say the same thing, but they include more words other than point 1, Ayn Rand.
And they typically have the guts to actually include a return email address that we can get back to them and ask for further clarification, because I have no idea if that was intended to be tongue-in-cheek or if it was actually serious, but whatever. So that's my little mailbag for now, and I've got more, but I think we've got some callers.
Yeah, we're
line,
gonna take some callers in just a minute. I'm gonna actually hit an additional point from another email, and I'm gonna do it from memory because I didn't bring my email inbox with me. It's getting really heavy. The bigger that hard drive, the more full that hard drive gets, the heavier it is.
Yeah.
By the way, the number will be back up as soon as we clear off some of these calls. Anyone's welcome to call in. And with regard to our events, the other thing that I forgot to mention is that you don't have to be a member to come to any of the ACA events. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come down, as long as you're not coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke. Please don't. You can just call into the show. You can email, whatever. We're just trying to have a get-together with some people, and I don't march. I go to churches, usually more often when I'm invited, but I don't go in there and create a ruckus. Mm-hmm. And I don't go knocking on your door.
Yeah.
Still believe in Jesus? I can fix that.
Yeah.
Because first of all, I can't. And second of all, that's absurd and intrusive. Yeah. We do the show, and if you want to watch, great. And if you don't. And if you want to call in and you want to talk, do so. One of the emails I got was from somebody who, their teacher, they're in a science class at, I presume, a high school somewhere. I haven't discussed ages or anything. And their science teacher explained evolution in a way that was very difficult for them to understand, or not really understand. It was very difficult for them to buy into. And when they, assuming their explanation of what their science teacher said is correct, I can completely understand. Because the implication was that adaptive traits are something that is almost consciously or a willed act. Yeah. Essentially, the idea that whales evolved from some form of land mammal was portrayed by the teacher as there were these wolf-like creatures who spent so much time in the water that they gradually adapted to the water and then became whales, which is only true in a very, very vague and simplistic sense. It's not like they said, "Oh, I really like the water. I'm going to make sure that I, grow a tail or lose some of this hair, make it easier." It's evolution is simply change over time, and there's no direction, there's no end goal, there's no conscious motivation or will to become something else. Change happens, and those entities that are best adapted because of the change for the environment that they're living in at the time actually the ones that are worst are selected against. And those that have the more beneficial traits reap the rewards of this. Mm-hmm. Now, but how does a wolf-like thing turn into a whale? Lots and lots and lots of time. That's the part that we're really bad about grasping, are these vast expanses of time, vast expanses of distance, etc. But this conversation got sidetracked because she kept wanting to make appeals to the Bible and Jesus and why she believes what she believes. And I said, it's fine that you believe this stuff. And she's like, well, I wouldn't think that anybody would be able to make up this stuff about Jesus because somebody who was there would have said something. And I said, well, you do realize that there are no confirmed eyewitness accounts, she was only referring to the Gospels. Yeah. A lot of Christian, including Christian scholars, think that John may have actually been John the Apostle, and so was therefore possibly an eyewitness. But there's no confirmed eyewitness accounts in any of them. And she's like, well, what do you mean? Matthew was a disciple, and clearly he was an eyewitness. The book of Matthew wasn't written by Matthew. We don't know who, well, I can't say it wasn't written by. There's no good reason to think it was, and there are plenty of good reasons to think that it wasn't. The book is actually anonymous. We don't have any of the early, oh, by the way, I'll just save us time. This is a Bible, the NIV. Don't have to listen to an atheist. If you have a decent Bible that has extra information besides just, the red letter stuff, the NIV happens to contain a little discussion about the Synoptic Gospel, but Matthew, right here, really, this is the introductory page before the book actually starts. On the authorship, it says, although the first Gospel is anonymous, the early church fathers were unanimous in holding that Matthew, one of the 12 apostles, was its author. However, the results of modern critical studies, in particular those that stress Matthew's alleged dependence on Mark for a substantial part of his gospel, have caused some biblical scholars to abandon Matthean authorship. Why, they ask, would Matthew, an eyewitness to the events of the Lord's life, depend so heavily on Mark's account? The best answer seems to be that he agreed with it and wanted to show that the apostolic testimony to Christ was not divided. I happen to disagree with what they think the best explanation is. When you have word-for-word copying between the Gospels, I don't think the best explanation is, he got it right, so I'll just copy his stuff. I think that when you have a bunch of anonymous books that are written decades, if not further, from the events that they purport to describe, that you are on incredibly shaky ground to say, well, Jesus said this. Okay, first of all, outside of the Bible, there's no confirmable evidence that there was a Jesus. I'm not claiming that there wasn't. I'm just saying that all those neat little events from his life aren't recorded anywhere other than the Bible by any contemporaries. I mean, sure, a century or so later, somebody would say, oh, this happened. But I mean, where's the account of the birth, the crucifixion, the trial, the healing, the walking on water, the speaking to crowds, the various miracle accounts? Where's the extra biblical account of Matthew's claims that Herod killed all the firstborns? Where's the extra biblical account of the zombies during the day of crucifixion that rose up and walked into Jerusalem? That's kind of something you'd think somebody would report. If a bunch of dead people climbed up out of their graves and marched into town, boy, it's odd that that's not there.
Yeah.
And when you add all this together, at a minimum, no matter whether you're a Christian or not, at a minimum you have to admit, if you're honest, that this is not a book that you should dogmatically assert as true. At a minimum, you have to go that far. And if you don't, I don't know what to say. She was of the opinion that, hey, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, how convenient that most Christians seem to have that kind of perception, despite the fact that in most Bibles, and a casual search on who wrote the Bible will demonstrate that there's a lot more questions than answers. The problem is that if the churches made this common knowledge, it's not like they're going out of their way to hide it. The information's there. But if they stood up on Sunday morning and said, now we are not sure who wrote the Gospel of Matthew, but we're assuming that it might have been the Apostle Matthew because of its particular Jewish slant, and here's a potential eyewitness. People in the pews would go, huh? And that's I think one of the problems that we end up facing. I'm not going to go into details on arguments for Jesus' historicity or anything else. All I'm saying is that if you come from this point of view that this book is the infallible or nearly infallible, God-breathed scripture of a higher power, and that you have a good rational justification for this, that there's evidence to support the reliability of what's in here, you're simply wrong. It's fine for you to accept it, and it's fine for you to accept it on faith if that's what you're comfortable with. But to assert that you have a rational justification for this is simply false. But anyway, we want to go ahead and take some phone calls. We've got Russ in San Antonio.
Hey guys, congrats on the election.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really happy for both of you.
We both ran unopposed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh well, that's not much of a victory then.
Yeah.
But
It just means everybody was scared of us.
Well, I think you guys are probably the two best anyway.
Oh, thanks.
Well, thank you.
Okay, you can stop sucking up now and get to your question.
I've got a little story for you that you guys are going to love.
Okay.
Okay.
Especially you, Jen. Okay, I asked my best friend to call in because it's his story, but he totally refused. He said, no way. He said I could call in and tell his story, I swear, if I use an alias. I can't say his name, so can I call him Bob?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, this is totally true.
Like I
except
can
for his
verify
name.
it anyway.
Yeah.
Yep. You're going to want to look this up after I get done anyway.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Okay, I'm 25, he's 28, he's 3 years older than me, but we've been best friends all our lives. Okay, we grew up together. I actually
Not
introduced
both.
him to his wife. So he wouldn't lie to me about something big.
Okay.
I have no reason to doubt him, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
He's a doctor, okay? He's a very well-known doctor, and a few years ago I got upset because he actually went to Africa for a couple of months to take part in a medical study.
Okay.
And I didn't know what it was at the time until I saw the pictures when he came back. And he told me they specifically went to East Africa to determine that circumcision can reduce HIV transmission.
Okay.
Not that they went to see. He said they went to determine that. In other words, He swears to this day it's a completely dishonest study. He said they got 1/3 of the way through the study, and their results were not favorable in their eyes. In other words, they determined that anyone who has smegma is less likely to contract HIV. That would be any man with foreskin or any woman with a labium. So apparently they stopped everything 1/3 of the way through the study and switched the whole process. And what they did was basically take about 1,000 uncircumcised Kenyans who were about 70% HIV positive, 1,000 circumcised Kenyans who were 20% positive, and put them in rooms. And when the European fact checkers, came along, they said, wow, 70% of the uncircumcised Kenyans are HIV positive. Okay, so they took this to the UN, they took this to the World Health Organization, which basically bought it up. They said basically the next day, the UN now advocates circumcising Africans. But the thing is, they never completed their study. They even admit that in their writings. They also said it would be unethical for anyone to try to disprove them. It would be unethical. In other words, if you went and tried to disprove them in East Africa and did a similar study, you'd be scorned in the medical community for being
because
unethical.
not just because you're going against them, but because if it's true, you would actually be doing harm by doing the studies. That's what
Right.
their objection
Well, he tells me there's 4 ways in which you can know that this is a lie.
Okay?
Number one, you look at the history. Every 20 years, physicians come up with a new excuse for circumcision.
This
And
is
within a decade, it's always disproven. And they have to come up with a new one.
Right.
HIV is the latest one. I would recommend you guys don't buy into this right away. Number 2, he said, they don't want anyone else to do a similar study. That's proof that they're lying. Number 3, most other legitimate medical organizations are contesting and challenging the WHO now, like the American Academy of Pediatrics, which basically won't put it in their yearly literature, saying it's BS, and they don't want it to be used as an excuse to circumcise American infants. And number 4, the WHO said it, so you have to question it. And, I didn't believe this at first, but when I Googled HIV circumcision fraud, HIV circumcision debunk, there's apparently a lot of doctors, there were dozens of doctors in this study, a lot of them totally disagree with the findings. And I know, Matt, you said about it, actually it was a year ago, you said HIV prevention might be the only legitimate reason to circumcise someone, but I'm here to say apparently that's not true, because I believe my friend 100%. He would not lie to me.
Well,
He says that I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Truly, I'm not.
Oh, no.
But apparently there's something going on here. There's some sort of circumcision agenda, and it may be monetary. Because I once knew a doctor who told me that all doctors know there's no benefit to circumcision, but they get $300 every time they do it.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
try to...
Jen a year ago did a show on this very subject, her first one,
Right.
and covered some of this. That's probably the show you're talking about, where I said that
May 4th.
that this may be the one and only case.
Matt, I
And
love you, but you were wrong.
Well, no, I was right.
Well,
I was right
you
because
can't
I
always
said
believe
it.
every medical study, because sometimes they go in with a pre-written...
Can I finish
agenda.
my sentence?
I'm sorry, Matt.
I was right because I said it may be based on the data that I had at the time.
Right.
I wasn't making an assertion that this is a case where circumcision is the best way to go.
Matt, you're the most open-minded person. You always look at evidence.
Yeah, and while I haven't checked yours out,
I know it.
I don't find it unbelievable, and it's certainly something worth looking into further. So,
He's in the
we
room
can
with me, and
follow
he
it.
refuses to call in because he's scared.
Well, ask him if he
That's
would
fine.
ask him if he would email me.
Okay, he's willing to email you links to other doctors who were there, but that's all he's willing to do. He won't even
Okay.
say his name.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
No.
Now,
I don't fault him for it. If he,
No.
we're talking about his potential livelihood.
Well, he's talking about the United Nations. Everybody disagrees.
I'm not afraid of the UN.
Yeah.
They don't want to take on the UN.
The
Yeah.
UN doesn't want to take
Can
on
I
the
ask
UN.
you guys a question?
Yeah.
Why would anyone want to advocate circumcising the world? If there's no real proof.
Apart from money and the fact that it's become kind of mythical in the aesthetic area, the only justification I can come up with is religious.
Well, there is a psychological component to this. And you see this actually in Africa in cultures that circumcise women, and I use that circumcise women not to trivialize what's done.
That's a labiodectomy.
Yeah, just to, to...
It's mutilation.
Yeah, it's all
Well, if you
mutilation.
cut off the clitoris, that's totally different. A labia is technically foreskin, so if you cut that off, that's fine, but it's not what they do.
Well, actually, mostly that's what they do. The most severe forms of female genital mutilation are also the rarest forms, and the most severe forms of male circumcision are worse than most of what happens to women and girls, which, like I said, is not to trivialize any of that, because
No.
none of it's right.
I'm just saying none of it's ever been proven to have any medical justification, and every time they come up with one, it's disproven within 1 decade.
Right. Now, I guess I have a couple of points here. One is that if you go to Africa and you look at the cultures that practice some form of genital cutting on women, first of all, there's no culture that cuts women that does not also cut men.
Right.
So those two are linked. The second thing is that if you look at who's cutting the women and who's advocating it, it's other women. And so you ask yourself, why would any woman advocate doing this to her daughter? And part of it is that they have to justify what was done to them. And so I think a very similar thing is going on when we're talking about male circumcision. There's a lot of men who advocate it. And if you ask parents, and people have asked parents who are in the process of making this decision for a male child, a lot of the men, it comes down to, well, I think he should look like me.
Yeah.
Well, if you talk to a circumcised man, show him a uncircumcised penis, they say that the immediate reaction is he has to make fun of it. I mean, it's just inevitable, and it's almost like, boy, that's more complete than mine. I better make fun of that and say that it's inferior in some way. My parents could not have degraded me. They must have enhanced me in some way. So I'm going to go my whole life saying I was enhanced, when in fact might not be the case.
Well, I can say it's almost certainly not the case that things get better when you cut parts of a functional organ off.
Apparently, it's better to have your entire birthday suit minus your umbilical cord.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
At least as far as we can demonstrate medically. Russ, I got to let you go, but thanks a lot for calling in, and have your friend feel free to send us an email with whatever information or links he wants to. Okay. We may come back and touch on this topic more as soon as we get more reliable information.
Well,
and a phone call,
Mr.
no
President.
slight to you.
Right.
Thanks, Russ.
All right, take care.
We've got Jason in St. Charles, Illinois. Hello? Oh, no, that's Steve in Seattle. Hang on. This is Jason.
No, that was correct.
Who's this?
You had Jason before.
Okay, so this is...
So this is Steve?
This is Jason right now.
Okay.
Then I'm right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is from St. Charles.
Okay.
How you doing?
Good. Doing.
You had a question or something that you've been holding patiently to ask.
Yeah, I've been listening. I'm waiting patiently. I wanted to start out, and I was hoping I can kind of get to a couple points, so I'll kind of try and move this. But my first, and I could just kind of give you guys the floor and just maybe explain to me, because you both seem like you're very smart people and capable people, just what it is that you don't believe in. Because I know that as an atheist, it's basically just an absence of a belief, that you're willing to express. So I was just curious if you could just express to me what it is that you lack, the belief that's lacking. Just kind of elaborate that a little bit.
I disbelieve in any God.
Okay. I mean, the definition of God varies from person to person.
You're right.
Where one person might have this extremely literal interpretation of whatever holy book they're going to versus somebody else who's
Yeah.
Hang on, Jason. There's a reason why I wouldn't have answered your question in the first place.
Okay.
I'm not going to list for you. I'm not going to list for you every possible thing that I don't believe in, because that's absurd, and we would be here forever. What I do instead is say to whoever I'm talking to, what is it that you're claiming? What is it that you believe in? Why? And I can tell you whether I agree or not. And
That's
with regard to the God question, the gods that I have, the God claims that I have been presented with, whether they be a variety of different takes on Yeshua, Yahweh, Jehovah, Adonai, Allah, or anything like that, I don't believe those. And there are a number of other supernatural claims and metaphysical claims made by different religious groups that don't necessarily link to a God, ghosts, afterlives, reincarnation, that I don't believe in those either. I don't believe they're true because I don't have evidence. But I couldn't possibly go through and list everything I don't believe in. And
Okay.
if somebody defines, this pen as God, well, okay, I obviously believe it exists. I think they're rather stupid for calling it God because you've put a label on this that, based on normal usage, just doesn't apply.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think the word God has all these connotations that go along with it now. So it's like someone says, like, yeah, I believe in God. You have to be like, well, what do you mean by that? And then you could have either skepticism or you can go into elaborating on different things, which I commend you guys for doing. So I just want to say that because, there's definitely been times in my life where, somebody who's very ardently religious will say, and, they think they have these ultimate answers, and then they're like, basically kind of trying to force them on you. You're like, well, I just don't really grasp what you're saying, or, I have this question about that, but they won't even explore it. So one of the things I just want to, say is that for me, it's like my definition has to be more realistic, and I guess it's just like it makes more sense to me in my mind that, like, there's this, consciousness sort of preceded the material, I guess you could say, and, some people are like, well, it doesn't make any sense, but, all these, like, yoga masters, like, they meditate, and what they do is, like, they clear out their mind, so it's like their mind becomes almost in the background, and, like, they're just in touch with, consciousness and awareness, and,
You're using a lot of buzzwords that, to me, don't make any sense until you explain them further.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you mean by
What's it mean to not
that.
be in touch with your mind, but to be in touch with consciousness?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why would you think this assertion that you made before that there's some consciousness preceding the material?
yeah, like the disincarnate preceding the incarnate kind of thing, basically.
Okay.
I would say, well, I've actually had, and for some people, this is, you have to do it, responsibly and respectfully, but there's been some experiences I've had, sometimes it was recreational, sometimes I actually started taking it a lot more seriously, but there's like different, shamanistic type things, and I would highly recommend doing it with respect and carefully, and even where it's legal, etc. But those experiences for me have just like opened my mind and my eyes.
So you're talking about getting high and pondering the universe.
No, not. You see, that's a connotation, Matt, that you've described to me, and you don't even know me.
There's
People who've done this,
Jason, you said where it's legal. What's legal?
Well, that's an example. Like
Exploring the
basically,
cosmos?
I could say, psilocybin mushrooms.
Sure.
I could say D. I could say cannabis. I could say iboga.
That's right.
I
So
could say
you're
things
talking
like
about
that.
getting high and exploring the cosmos. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just clarifying.
That's a connotation. I would say. I'll go ahead and say it's a connotation. And sure,
Okay. So you're talking
getting high
about trying
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals in order to help possibly expand your mind. I'm just clarifying what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, I would say using not even pharmaceuticals, but using like different plants that grow naturally on the earth, and I would be.
Yeah, those
I
are
would be-
pharmaceuticals.
I would describe them differently. I
Really?
would say pharmaceuticals are man-made, and you could also patent.
You do realize that
patent
aspirin comes
pharmaceuticals.
from the bark of a tree, right?
Yeah.
What's that?
You do realize that aspirin comes from the bark of a tree,
What
right?
I'm telling you, yeah, but pharmaceuticals, you can patent pharmaceuticals.
Whatever. It doesn't
Well,
matter what you
yeah.
label it. Get to whatever it is you're claiming. I wasn't even objecting. Let me say this: if somebody wants to get high, especially where it's legal, go for it. I'm just
Yeah,
clarifying what you're talking about.
Right on, cool. And obviously too, Matt, like the overuse of anything is going to be a problem, so I'm not like advocating somebody's just like stoned all day and then they try and come up with all the answers. I'm saying that those experiences will open someone's mind to the fact that like, there's different, there's different frequencies of consciousness, that sort of thing. And really, to me, it's just sort of...
What does that mean? What does
Things
that
are
mean,
integrated
different frequencies of consciousness?
So that happens for me, and there's other ways to do it that are, you can just do it through taking a walk, just introspection. But those are very heightened, high ways to do it, I guess you could say. And so basically, so that has led me to, was never raised religious. Both my parents are leaning towards atheism. I discussed it very openly with them, and they make very good points. But my mom, some of the discussions we've had, she kind of is finally starting to, she see what I see, and my dad and I, we totally don't even argue anymore, which is the coolest thing. I'm to the point now where I don't need to argue with anybody. I don't want, with you guys, I don't want to disprove you, whatever. I just want to talk and explore what's going on, because I think a lot of stuff he says has merit. And I think that's what the problem is. Some of these people, they're so ardent in their beliefs, it's they shut you up from anything you have to say, and it's so frustrating because you're trying to communicate with them, share something real, and it's they just totally shut off the conversation from even happening. Or and I'm trying to get better where it's if somebody makes a counterpoint, I don't have to prove them right. I just
Here's the thing, Jason. I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is that you're talking about, other than
Found God in a bong.
That's just rude, and that's just making fun of somebody who does something different than you. I don't appreciate that. I mean, that's not what I'm saying. And
cry me a river. I'm trying to understand something, and you're talking about it'll tune you into the fact that there are different frequencies of consciousness. That is meaningless talk. Explain what you mean by that.
I would say, Matt, one of the primary things, and this is what happens when people meditate and so forth, is it'll tune you into the fact that you're one with nature, you're one with the cosmos, and everything is integrated. And it's ineffable in a way, but that is essentially what is imparted to you at that level of consciousness. And to me, that's where a lot of these different notions come from. And even ancient civilizations, they would practice this kind of thing with their shamans and so forth, and they got it down to a science. And
they got it down to a science. First of all, you assert that oneness. Hang on. First of all, you assert that oneness with the universe is a fact. That's not something you've actually demonstrated. Second of all, you're reliant.
How am I going to demonstrate?
Oh, your ass is on hold now. Second of all, you are asserting that the pathway to understanding this is by chemically altering your brain so that it is working in a non-standard method, and that this opens you up to truth. That may be the case, but you'd actually have to demonstrate it. All you can do is say that this is the experience and this is the understanding that I gained from this altered state of mind. You haven't done anything to demonstrate that it's true, and that's what matters. You there?
Is he on hold?
Oh, first we were rude, and then I put you on hold, and now you've hung up. What did you smoke before you called? I don't mean to just, Jen wasn't trying to just make fun of you. It's a serious question. You discovered God in a bong. It's a serious question.
You'd be surprised how many people have discovered God in a bong.
And in a bottle.
And then they email us and tell us about it.
And in meditation and all of these other things. And I'll agree that you don't necessarily, you can take the chemicals out of the equation. And let's just do meditation, and we're going to think about the world that we live in. We're going to engage in an attempt to reach out to the cosmos and find truth. Maybe you'll come to some sort of epiphany. Maybe you'll gain a better understanding about who you are or what the universe is. But whatever understanding you come to needs to be demonstrated as true. The mere fact that you've had some experience or epiphany, or that you have a view of the universe, does not demonstrate in any way that the view is true. No more so than Paul's Damascus Road experience demonstrates to anybody else that Jesus exists and is the Son of God. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. And if you are engaged in this with chemical additives as well, then you may still discover truth. I'm not saying that that's impossible. What I'm saying is, when we analyze this from an external perspective, which is more likely? I mean, do you think that I've never been high in my life? Do you think that I've never tripped out before? I watched a piece of pizza turn into a lizard from an M.C. Escher painting and crawl across over to the side. I have had hallucinations like that. so what? I felt one with everything, but that doesn't mean I am. That's the problem. That's the thing you have to demonstrate. And while you can come on all day long and advocate, getting high and thinking about the universe, and by the way, not speaking for the ACA here, but for me personally, I'm generally in favor of the legalization of a lot of different drugs. And if it's legal in your area and you want to take a particular chemical and you're not hurting anybody and you're a responsible adult who's taking responsibility for their actions, go for it. And think about the universe and think about anything you want to. But don't buy into this idea that just because you felt something that it's true. That's not the way the world works.
No. And I think the point that we were trying to make here is that when you start adding psychoactive substances to this mix, you're going to have a different brain state. And what you end up with, you might, have a conversation with God as a result of this. You might think that you're in the 7th level of hell or something and have a really horrible experience. And there's no way to know in advance what you're going to experience, but it doesn't mean any of it's real.
Yeah, I'm not putting you down for your desire to explore, to think about the big questions and big issues. I'll applaud you for that. What I'm saying is that the conclusions that you seem to be advocating, you haven't done anything to demonstrate that they're anything more than, ooh, I feel this way about it. How is your claim any more real than the person who has never taken any psychoactive substance and just says, I just feel this giant wave of joy over me whenever I talk to God? Okay, you're experiencing something and that's how you express it. What's true? That's the only thing I care about, is what's true. Now, if you claim, as some, there are ministers, Ray Comfort's done this a lot, that he can prove God exists to somebody inside of 30 seconds, and that all they have to do is hit their knees and sincerely ask God to reveal himself to them, and he will. Well, I'm sorry, but I've done it. Most of the co-hosts and people participating in the ACA have done this, and yet there hasn't been a single revelation. Oh, well, you guys just weren't serious enough or sincere enough. Oh, so it's my fault. It's my fault that after spending 25 plus years as a Christian and wanting to become a minister or do whatever it was God wanted me to do and wanting to fulfill my obligation under 1 Peter 3:15 and wanting to be the best witness for Christ that I could after years of slacking off and being sincere, spending years studying the Bible and hitting my knees in prayer, asking God to reveal himself and give me direction, I wasn't sincere enough. But Joe Bob, who walks down the aisle at the revival because he feels guilty about cheating on his wife, he gets the revelation. Pull the other one. We got Steve in Seattle. Are you there?
Hello, Steve?
Steve in Seattle. I was going to say sleepless, but he might have gone to sleep while he was waiting. Sorry, Steve. Scott in Columbia. Are you there? Are we having problems with our phones?
Hello, Scott in Columbia.
I'm here.
Oh,
All right,
good.
go. Cool.
Oh, I was just about to give up on you.
No, we're getting the calls quicker, and I'm going to talk less. You go.
Okay.
Okay.
What do you got?
Yeah, I just have a fairly quick question for you, really, because I've been talking with my friends about the how atheism and agnosticism are not mutually exclusive and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And how agnosticism, at least in the modern sense, putting aside that stuff from Huxley, is whether you know or whether you claim to know, whichever side you're on.
Okay.
On the word "no," that word is still hotly contested in philosophy. Is there some sort of standard definition of "no" that is used for this problem, or is it just put your own definition of "no" on it, and then you've got an even bigger definitional problem?
I'll do this anyway.
Yeah, you'll do this one. 'Cause
Sorry.
That was your lectures.
Yeah. No, there's no agreement on what no is, but there's a general consensus, if nothing else, that we're talking about a colloquial understanding. Can we get the weed off my back?
Yeah.
Get talking about the colloquial knowledge. I gave a lecture to the ACA. It's actually available online. You can watch, and I think it's just called Belief. But my general position is this, and yes, this is my own definition, but I can justify why I use these particular definitions. Belief is acceptance of a claim as true.
Right.
Most of the time when we say we believe something, what we're saying is that there's some claim and I'm accepting that it's true. You can believe things to varying degrees of certainty that approach but never quite reach absolute certainty. So if your definition of knowledge is absolute certainty, then we don't know anything other than the esoteric and the logical absolutes that we keep hammering on about, which I won't go into. But how we normally use the term know, when we normally talk about knowledge, what we mean is that we believe something to such a degree of certainty that it would be absurd and potentially worldview altering to discover that we're mistaken. So I, for example, I believe my car is out in the parking lot. I believe this to a high degree of certainty because I drove it here and I parked it there. But I've been in here for a while, and it could have been towed or stolen or something else. So I can't claim to know it, but I'm pretty sure it's out there. I know this is a pen, and the reason I can say that, and it doesn't matter that I don't have absolute certainty or complete understanding of this. I'm talking about whatever the hell it is that I'm actually holding or experiencing as holding. I'm going to define it as a pen, and I am as certain about this pen being right here as I am about anything. That's my take on knowledge, and I don't know that there's any other definition of knowledge that I find remotely as useful as that. And it's why also that I would say that Gnosticism and agnosticism they're not separate from theism and atheism. They are subsets because knowledge is a subset of belief. Here's everything you believe. I'm making a big circle for those who can't see it with my head in the middle. And then we'll say that the area occupied by my head are those things that I know or claim to know. That there's maybe a radiating degree. I'm making up diagrams on the fly. Varying degrees of certainty up to or approaching absolute certainty. Is that clearer or clear as mud? I put him to sleep already.
Yeah, I guess so.
No, I mean, the video's delayed, so I haven't even been watching you on the video.
Oh, that's fine. Well, I mean, you heard me on the phone, though.
But now I see you making all those arm gestures you were talking about.
Yeah. Is that clearer? That's at least my take on knowledge. I don't claim that it's anybody else's. I do, however, claim that it's the single best definition of knowledge anybody's ever come up with.
Yeah, okay.
I get
That's
to say
fair.
so.
I mean, since walking out of a philosophy class a couple semesters ago, I've actually been more in the externalist camp on the philosophical question where you don't even know if you know. You know, there's not a standard for that. So I was probably in the least useful definition possible, at least on the philosophical world. You know.
I think
But,
most tend to go for. Oh, you probably can't hear me. I would guess that, barring my own personal definition aside, most would tend to go begin with justified true belief and expand from there in order to correct the problems with justified true belief. But I'm not going to do another lecture on that right now. But if you go to the ACA site and go to the lecture thing, you can actually watch what I talked about then.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate it.
As a reminder, there's 26 minutes left in the show or so. After it's over, everybody involved, except for me today, gets together and goes to Threadgills on Riverside. There's the address. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us. The show's on until 6 o'clock. We get down there around 6:30 or so, and you're welcome to come down and have some dinner or drinks and conversation or whatever. We got Steve. Are you there?
Steve from Minnesota.
Yes.
Hello. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
You're on the air.
I know you're not used to this. I'm an atheist, and I have just a quick question and no backstory.
Go.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm curious what you guys have to say about the previous, or the recent blogosphere from P.Z. Myers, Jerry Coyne, about the accommodation that they are critical about with the NCSE, the National Academy of Sciences, etc.
I have to admit I have not paid much attention to that in the last week or so just because I've been just too busy lately. I do know that there was a statement that the NCSE put out a while back. I want to say it's been actually about a year or more ago. And they eventually came back and reworded it because it was, I guess, gratuitously critical of religion, and it didn't actually, the inclusion of that language didn't actually further the point they were trying to make. And I'm sorry I don't have any specifics on that. I didn't disagree with that, but I think that this latest flap is something else entirely. And I'm sorry, I'm just not that much, I'm not that up on what the latest round of this is.
And I'll chime in to say that I'm actually also way behind on blogs and emails, so I'm not, go ahead and give specifics if you want to.
I don't really recall specifics. It's in short, it's that that Jerry Coyne and P.Z. Myers and a few others have been saying that the NCSE, the NAS, and a few other very important scientific organizations have been more accommodating to religious agendas than they have to science itself. I don't quite agree with it, but they do make a lot of good points, and I was just curious to see what you guys had to say about it.
Yeah, no, I'll check it out and maybe talk about it on a later show. I will say this. I'm a big fan of P.Z. Myers. He's actually been on Nonprofits. I don't necessarily agree 100% with everything P.Z. Myers has to say or everything that Richard Dawkins has to say, or, I mean, pick anybody. But I have a pretty good feel for P.Z. Myers, and
Yep.
I'm willing to bet with about a 98% certainty that I'm likely to agree with his take on it.
Yeah, for the most part, I
And
do
that's a
agree
big
with
risk
him.
to say that having not read it. But I mean, I try. It's like
Yep.
it's like if you got an answer from Jen, and I hadn't actually read it. If you sent her an email and she replied to you and I didn't see it, I'd be pretty confident that Jen gave you an answer that I'm going to mostly agree with.
Yes, for the most part, I agree. Actually, I think I entirely agree with them for my own personal standards, but I think what they are saying against the criticism against the NCSE and the NAS and other organizations, I only disagree partially because I think it may be actually necessary that they may have to accommodate politically. That's about it. Otherwise, I think I entirely agree with them.
Yeah, and I'm going to hold off on getting into the... It's really easy for me to sit up on a high horse and ignore the practical reality of it. The practical reality that you're very unlikely to be elected to a significant position in the United States if you are openly an atheist, especially if you're openly hostile to religious ideas.
Yes.
That's unlikely. And there are, unfortunately, the politics spill over to all kinds of things. It's a shame that it has to be that way. It would be very nice if we could have an appropriately secular government, and if the public school systems in particular could remain appropriately secular, which is not anti-religious, it's indifferent towards religion. Let's teach kids about world religions, have comparative religions courses, let's teach literature courses as well, but when it comes to science, you only get to bring science into the classroom, and it is not wrong for science organizations to say, I'm sorry, but your religious ideas are not going to qualify for this. And even if they don't say I'm sorry, even if they just say, your religious ideas don't qualify as science, somebody's going to take that as rude whether you put the I'm sorry in it or not. Somebody's going to take it as rude even if you were to say, I happen to agree with you that there is a God, but I don't think it should be taught in science class, or I don't think anything that remotely approaches that should be taught in science class. They're going to find that rude. You've got Ken Miller, who does great talks about evolution, supporting evolution, etc., who's also a Catholic. Doesn't think this stuff should be taught in school. And yet, when he talks about evolution, he's going to piss off the creationists, and when he talks about his God, oddly enough, he doesn't piss off the atheists. It's baffling. He confuses the atheists.
Yeah, I think most of us are
how are you
mystified.
reconciling it? But I'm not mad that he talks about it. It's just that when if I were to go to a lecture of his, I'd be interested in the science portion, and when he gets to the religion portion, I'd be interested in that because I'm a freak about, listening to religious stuff. But I would be going, okay, what does one have to do? How are you reconciling it? There's lots of questions. But I just realized the absurdity of the fact that we're going to sit around and have a discussion about something that neither of us have read. So
Yeah.
let me move on to some other calls real quick, Steve.
Let's take Ken.
Okay, thank you.
Riverside
Thanks,
next.
Steve. Is it Ken in Riverside?
Yeah, what's up?
How are you?
You hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
There's
can.
a slight
Hey.
delay, so ignore your broadcast and just focus on the phone.
Okay. Well, I guess I wanted to define God,
Okay.
but I'm going to do it this way. Do you accept that logically that there has to be a first cause?
It depends on what you mean by that.
Yeah.
I mean, do you believe that there's a first cause? You don't have to call it God. I'm just...
A first cause for what? For everything? That there was a beginning for everything?
Yeah.
No.
That there's an infinity?
I think infinity is a concept that's useful in some ways.
Well, yeah, that this first cause, you would agree that this first cause would be infinite, right?
We haven't
No,
agreed there's a first cause.
I just said I didn't agree that there had to be a first cause. Why should there have to be a first cause? Why
Well,
couldn't...
don't you think the universe is infinite? It's kind of the first cause? I don't understand.
The universe, as we currently understand it, definitely had a beginning, but we have a scientific understanding of what that beginning is. We can't say anything about what came before that. We don't have any evidence for it.
Well, don't you believe that that's the first cause, though? I mean, isn't that the infinite thing that you believe that there's no beginning or end to it?
I think that we have an understanding, or at least a workable theory of how the universe came into existence, but I don't think we can say anything about what happened before that.
It may in fact be absurd to talk about before
Yeah.
that with
Yeah,
regard
no,
to time. So
exactly, because... I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Say something?
Go ahead.
Because before, to say that something is before would imply that there's time, right?
I didn't get that. What?
Something before
To say
the
that
time
something
there
that's
was time.
before would imply time, temporal, right?
Yeah, it would.
Exactly. And according to, I think the Big Bang, or maybe we can, I don't know, you can probably clarify it, there was no time,
No.
right?
No, that's not accurate. What
That's
it
a
is,
singularity.
what is said there, and we're getting way out of this, is that it is useless to talk about time prior to this because we have no concept of what this would be. It's not like you can, this idea of tracing back, well, what came before that, well, what came before that, well, what came before that. Are you saying that there, for example, I'm familiar with the first cause argument. You're not the first to begin going down that road. And you're going to say that that if there was necessarily a first cause, that this cause would have to be God eventually, right?
Well, I mean, if you want to call it that, I mean, God's just a name.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a first
Well,
cause.
Where did God come from?
Well, that's why I was going into the first cause. I mean, do you believe that there's an infinite number of causes? I mean, if there is, then how do you? I mean, that's like saying is like believing that there's a round square. I mean, you can't apply it. You can't show that. It doesn't make any sense.
Your question, which attempts to establish a dichotomy, doesn't make any sense. You asked if I believe there were an infinity of causes, and that this is.
Yeah, do you believe there's an infinite number of causes?
An infinity of what causes?
Infinite number of causes.
An infinite number of
Yes.
causes.
Yes, because time is going to go on. There's going to be an infinite, well, you're never going to reach an infinity. There's no actual infinity. It's not something you get to. But we're going to have causes forever.
Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense, though. Isn't that illogical?
No.
No.
Look, here's a cause. I'm causing that pen to hit the desk. Hey, and the pin hitting the desk caused there to be a sound. And that caused me to hear the sound, and that caused me to want to tell you about the sound. You get that now?
Well, I mean, just like you said, if there's an infinite number... Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, we're here.
If there's an infinite number...
There's not an infinite number. There's not. Infinity is not
yeah,
a number.
But if time was infinite, we would never have gone here, right? Just like
No.
We've been there
right?
before.
No. That's...
You weren't saying that?
No, that's a
No.
fallacy. You're using infinity as a quantity, and that's not accurate. That's not what it is.
Okay.
It's a concept. It's not a
What is
number.
it? Okay.
It's not a number. You can't get to infinity. There hasn't been an infinity. There's not an infinite number of steps between A and B. You're trying to use infinity as a quantity, and that's not correct.
Well, okay. So you're saying it's just a concept, it's just an idea, you can't apply it to
Yeah.
reality?
Take a circle.
Exactly.
If you start somewhere and you start moving around counterclockwise, when do you end? Never.
Well,
You can
infinity,
keep going
yeah, never.
counterclockwise around that circle forever.
Right.
That's the
Okay.
concept. It's not a number. That's a reason
Okay,
why
okay.
actually we use that little sideways figure eight for it.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes,
Yeah,
you're
we're
here.
here.
Okay. Well then, if that's the case, then why do you believe the universe is infinite? If it's because the universe is a thing, right? So it can't be. It's just a concept. Honestly, it's more than just a concept. It's reality because you
I don't-
believe the universe is infinite,
You're
right?
confusing the map with the place. The fact that I think that that infinity is a concept. It's something we use to conceptualize a non-ending sequence. 3.33333, continuing on forever. It's not like you ever get to a final 3. But that doesn't mean that I necessarily believe that the universe, as we understand it, had to have some kind of beginning, or that I would define it as infinite. Now, it may be the case that the universe, in some form or another, has always existed. That's one possibility. There's also the multiverse idea that you've got a universe that springs out of something else, but at some point you're conflating two ideas: the universe that you experience and whether or not it had a beginning point, which, by the way, it did, and we've identified it and confirmed it as the Big Bang through actual measurements of cosmic background radiation. Something I think Mark here would actually like to give a lecture on one of these days when I can get him to do it. The follow-up question to that Big Bang thing, don't do that, is what caused that Big Bang? And the answer is, we don't know. And anybody who asserts that they do know is lying. They need to present evidence to confirm what they're saying.
Okay, what do you mean when you say they don't know? Are you saying that the singularity, there's no evidence for the singularity, or what do you mean by that?
First of all, the singularity is a concept. I'm talking about what happened before the Big Bang. You think that there necessarily was some timeless entity that caused it, and presumably intelligent. And I'm saying, what's your justification for that?
Because, well, I would say that because logically there has to be a first cause, and that's the most rational thing to say, that there is some kind of first cause that set it off or created the singularity out of nothing, however you want to put it, and got us to this point.
Okay, let's just for the sake of argument, since you haven't heard anything else I've said, go ahead and assume that there had to be a first cause. Is it intelligent?
Yeah, because...
How do you know?
Because the first cause obviously would have to be, would have no limits.
Why?
There had to be
Why?
limits.
Why?
Because if there's any limits, then it wouldn't be the first cause. You would have to figure out where that came from, that limit.
First cause and unlimited are not equal. And they're certainly not equal just because you say so.
Well, I never said...
You just did.
Yeah.
I'm saying as far as logic goes.
I think you're confused about logic, because you've done nothing but present things as being equal when they're not, and I fail to see anything that even approaches a validly structured or sound syllogism anywhere.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
look, a series of unsupported assertions is not logic.
I said that let's just go ahead and grant that your claim is true, that there had to be a first cause. And my question
Okay.
was, if there had to be a first cause, is it intelligent? And you said yes. And I asked, how do you know that it was intelligent? And your answer was that it had to be because it was the first cause.
Yeah, because that's what. Well, yeah. I mean, because. Okay, do you want me to describe it? Okay, let me describe.
I want you to tell me how you know that this first cause is necessarily intelligent.
Oh, I know through logical deduction, scientific inquiry, and biblical revelation. That's how I know.
What's the logical deduction and scientific inquiry that supports your claim?
Well, I guess just as far as the singularity or the space-time theorem, it let's see. Okay, the space-time theorem basically
Says nothing at all about intelligence.
Well, I was going to get to that.
Well, you can't use A to support B unless A has some link to B. So if there is
Okay,
no
okay.
scientific
All right, let me
theory
answer
that
the question real
addresses,
quick.
let me finish, if there's no scientific theory that addresses intelligence, you don't get to prop up a scientific theory and say that it supports intelligence. So what's your argument for intelligence?
Okay, the finely tuned nature, the finely tuned laws. These laws popped into being right after the Big Bang, like I think a split second. So that really shows that there had to be some kind of intelligence to not only set the singularity off, but to create and these, or not create, but
Why does that demonstrate there has to be an intelligence?
because these finely tuned laws are so
Finely tuned for what?
Yeah.
For
What?
creating black holes? That's what the universe is finely tuned for.
Yeah.
no for life.
No,
Okay,
no.
no, wait a minute.
Go
Wait a
ahead.
minute. Are you saying that the universe is fine-tuned for life? Is that what you're
For
saying?
us,
For us.
it makes you yes.
Okay, you do realize that we don't exist
99.9%.
in most of the universe. Most of the universe is very hostile to life.
Well, I know that. Well, I know that, but I would say that this first cause, which we happen to call God, created the universe just for us.
That's pretty
You
arrogant,
understand
don't
what
you
I'm saying?
think?
Why on earth would you think that?
Well,
Because it's in the Bible?
he loves us. Well, yeah, that, and obviously this God would have to be all loving, but that's another thing.
Well,
All
let me
along,
ask you.
sure.
Let me ask you something. Is this God omnipotent?
Yes,
Okay, so then he could have created life to exist in any environment.
yes, if he chose it, but that's not as...
So this
not what he wants to
fine-tuning
do.
thing is completely irrelevant, because if he wanted us to grow corn on Mars, he could damn well do that, right?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that the fine-tuned universe is irrelevant. It's relevant for us to exist.
Well,
That's a choice.
But an omnipotent God could have made us exist in any environment, right?
Yes.
So the fact that the scientific laws are as we observe them to be is completely irrelevant to your argument. If you're claiming that your God is
see how.
omnipotent.
But
Pull
you know
up
what?
the
I think
Douglas
he's
Adams quote, if we can. Douglas Adams talks about fine-tuning. Imagine that, and I'll just paraphrase it. Imagine you're a puddle of water, and you what?
No, go on. I just heard it before.
Oh,
Go
okay.
on.
Well, if you've heard it before, then why the hell are you bringing this up?
Yeah.
Because you're talking about the universe is fine-tuned to produce us by a God who could have created us to exist in any universe, which makes fine-tuning irrelevant, according to your own claims. And
we do
beside the fact that the universe is not fine-tuned for us.
Yeah.
We happen to exist on a planet that supports our existence. And why? Well, because we've evolved on this planet. We have formed ourselves over time, along with the planet, to fit this. If you say the universe is finely tuned, then why is there so much empty space, dead space, hostile space? Why are there billions of stars in billions of galaxies if we're the result? I mean, that stuff over there can't possibly be affecting us.
Well, I mean, well, you know what? Can we do this another time?
Yeah, because we're almost out of time.
Yes, please call back.
Hold on. Okay, I just want to know some information, just real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do I get into the show earlier?
Call earlier.
Call earlier.
Just call earlier?
Yeah.
How do I email? Just
You
It's
open
on the
up your
screen.
email program and you email tv@atheist-community.org. It's right at the bottom of the screen right now. Thanks, Ken.
all right, thanks.
We got, is it Steve?
Hi.
Hey, Steve, you got almost no time, but go ahead. Well, sorry we made you wait.
Hey, no problem.
And then we hung up.
Yeah, no problem. A couple weeks ago, my daughter came over, and she brought over this movie series called Left Behind. It's a Christian-made series, and her mother kind of introduced her to it. And essentially what it's about is it's basically making the claim of that revelation is coming true, which in itself is one thing, but their response to that claim is not, let's do everything we can to stop the world from coming to an end, but let's convert as many Christians as we can before it actually happens. And I find that just totally arrogant and just demonstrates like I said, the profound arrogance of Christianity. And I wondered if you guys had seen the series.
Oh, I've seen them.
What the thoughts are on it.
I haven't bothered.
It's I've seen them. Actually, there was a Left Behind video game that got made that we made a lot of fun of on the nonprofits because it's easily one of the worst video games. But basically, the premise of the video game was that you're playing. They originally I think had where you could play for either the good or the evil side. You could work for the Antichrist, and I think they took that out. But that was part of the plan. Basically, you ran around killing people who weren't Christians. Now, the books don't advocate that. First, you tried to convert them first in the game. You had your army of, I don't know, chick tract holding guys who tried to convert them. When they didn't convert, you killed them, and you went after Catholics and Muslims mostly, if I'm remembering correctly. The Left Behind series, though, it's basically a natural extension of, the Book of Revelation is baffling. It almost didn't make the Bible. Some people consider it the ravings of a madman. And so for years, people have been trying to do their best to interpret what it says and apply it to the world. They were going back to more, hey, look at this, it's almost like that. I believe it's Schofield who came up with a lot of the end times stuff that then migrated into the Left Behind series. And basically what you've got is a best-selling book that is designed to make Christians feel special, as if their religion didn't do that enough, and advocate this entire end times philosophy. We're completely out of time, and it's still a spoon. Thanks, everybody, for calling in. There's the crew. We'll be back again next week. Russell and Martin should be here. And in the meantime, be nice, if you can. Oh, Threadgills. We'll be there in a little while.
Yeah.
Dope.